going to get started in another minute or two. It seems like a lot of people are joining, so thank you very much, and please hold tight.
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
So that's this is Beth Rubenstein from the CPC Learning Network at Columbia University, and we have with us today Leonardo Mir from UNICEF Mexico, who has brought together a wonderful selection of presenters who have been involved in the violence against children work in Mexico. Today we're going to hear from Ana Maria Sanchez, who is the Executive Secretariat of the National System for the Comprehensive Protection of Children and Adolescents, and she's going to be talking about the process for developing the Mexico Action Plan. And as well, she is going to give us some information about the content and topical areas, the strategies and programs that Mexico is emphasizing to prevent violence against children. And we're also going to hear from Dora Giusti from UNICEF Mexico about the specific emphasis that Mexico placed on consultations with children and adolescents as part of their development of their action plan to prevent violence against children. And we also have Eva Solosono from Homes for Hope, and she runs a CSO, and she's going to talk a bit about the involvement of CSOs, community-based organizations, in the plan, and also the implementation challenges that have been involved. So I'm going to hand things over to Leonardo, and he can give us some more background on the different speakers, but also some just webinar logistics. All of the attendees, your default is to be muted, but if you we're going to start with the presentations. If you have a question, you can either type it in the question box, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. So after the presentations, we'll have some time for Q&A. But during the presentations, the best way is probably just to type your question. But afterwards, if you raise your hand, I can go in and give you the permissions to speak. Thank you so much, and over to Leonardo.
Hi, Beth. This is Dora, actually, the Chief of Child Protection. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just going to give a brief introduction of who's here. Well, you've kind of said it, but we have also some other members. Ana Sanchez from the National Comprehensive System, Child Protection System, is here with us, and she will start with the presentation, and I will speak, as you said, a bit about the participation component. And soon we will have also the other member of the steering group, let's say, that is the National Security Commission. We also have some other participants here. WHO, the representation in Mexico, is here with us. And we have 8 NGOs confirmed, some of them on the way. But they will have also one brief participation to share the perspective of the NGOs on the plan development and on the implementation and future plans. So if that's okay, we will get started, and I will give the floor to Ana.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi, Beth. This is Ana Sanchez from the Comprehensive National System for Children Protection. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to share this experience. And okay, so the presentation is divided in 3 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, and then the children's participation, which is going to be in charge of Dora. And then the last part is just outlining some of the challenges that we have ahead. I have to say that this has been a fascinating process, and it's been a long process, a short and a long process, because we ended like having an action plan in 8 months, but it took like a lot of work of different actors, and not necessarily only the public entities, but also the civil society organizations, who are, some of them are here participating. So we're starting now. So the process for developing the Mexican action plan. Well, you know that this was a commitment from the government last year, and we had a kind of a route, and the route established the creation of the planning for this action plan to eradicate violence against children. The first thing that we actually did, it was like creating a steering committee. The steering committee is integrated by the National Security Commission, who we hope that they might be able to join us later on, and the Executive Secretary of the National System for the Comprehensive Protection of Children and Adolescents. This system, I mean, we're talking about the Executive Secretariat, but the system is compounded by different public entities, by the 32 states, and we've been creating a lot of stringent institutions around this comprehensive system. So, I mean, we work basically a little bit more on this action plan was the Executive Secretariat, but I want to emphasize that the National System for the Comprehensive Protection of Children and Adolescents is mainly compounded by all the public entities and the government. And of course, UNICEF, they provided the technical assistance, and hand by hand, and we had also had the WHO providing us assistance with the INSPIRE strategy. As you may know, the INSPIRE strategy is partly a very fundamental and important framework in this action plan. So who else participated in the Mexico Action Plan? So we have 24 civil society organizations, and they're adding up the numbers because there are a lot of civil society organizations who are actively interested in this initiative, in these strategies. Autonomous public bodies such as the National Commission of Human Rights. Also, well, 26 institutions of federal public administration, which are not the only ones. We are being adding also a lot of others public entities that need to be joined and need to be having strategies in this action plan. The Children's Commission of the Chamber of Deputies and Senators, the Supreme Court of Nations, and we did, but this is part of a process that Dora will explain later, the consultation with the children and adolescents. So I already talked a little bit about the commitment that the government did and that we have been implementing through mainly from last year, December 15, we created a commission against the Commission on Violence Against Children. That commission is basically such a space to articulate, coordinate, and organize actions within different public entities. And this commission, which was created on December 15 and 2016, has the participation of different entities, and the National Commission of Security is the one who chairs that commission, and the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Systems is the technical secretary of that commission. So the commission allows us to have that space to coordinate the actions and to plan the development of the action plan. So the stage for the development of the plan. Okay, here we are. So basically, we would have 7 stages, the overall process of the plan. And what we did first, with the help of the UNICEF and a wonderful consultant that they hired, is having identified the key actors which were involved in actions against violence. And this identification of key actors took us a while, but we did basically a good job on connecting with them and trying to get involved in working groups, some working groups that then were developed through the 7 strategies of the INSPIRE plan. Then well, you know, this takes a long time, and we have a lot of actions against violence, but all of those are scattered. A lot of those are not necessarily intended to end violence. So we had a lot of work to do that. And the mapping and the gathering of the information was mainly through questionnaires, but also to meetings. And then what we did was the systematize all the information through the and making sense of the information that we have out there. I mean, this is the action plan is an effort to put it all together what the federal government and other actors are actually doing to end violence against children. The working groups, which I already talked a little bit about, it was the necessary space that we had to have in order to talk and discuss about those actions. And this was an articulation process with the public entities, also civil society organizations participating, showing their methodologies, working out solutions to basically outline the main strategies that this action plan have to have. Then the drafting of the plan was designed respectively to what the plan had to have, and then was doing a general diagnosis of the situation in Mexico. One of the issues that we encountered was the lack of information, or the information that is out there but is not systematized. Then what we did in 28th of June, with all of these, I mean, it's easy to say it, but I mean, I think it was a lot of work behind it. We had to sit with the institutions that had responsibilities in each of the strategies of the plan, talk to them and say, okay, this is a plan that will be organized in three periods. One, that we want to emphasize the short actions by the end of this year. The other one, that we need to have medium and long-term planning and strategies to end violence. I mean, violence is, we wish that we could end it right away, but you know, there's a structural problems around violence, and there are a lot of types of violence which need not only the one entity working on it, but a lot of entities working on against violence. So the next one, so the three stages, as I talked a little bit, I'm a little bit behind with my ahead with my slides. So this is the three stages that I was talking about. So the first was designing strategies that we could complete at the end of this year. And the second stage, which we are on it right now, is working on the state action plans. And we choose 3 states to start with it. And the three states are Baja California, Sur, Guerrero, and Tamaulipas. And we have designed the guidelines to assist the states in developing the action plans. Actually, last week, we have the launching of the alliance in one of the states in Baja California Sur. So this is generating a lot of expectations for the states, and now we need to work on really identifying the strategies that the states need to implement all together with the municipalities, because the municipalities are the focal point and with the children. And the third stage is mobilizing actors and sectors. I mean, we know the Global Alliance is not only a strategy from the government. We need to mobilize other sectors, the private sectors, the other civil society organizations interested in this and in this action, and as well as the academia. The academia had to be a good ally on all of this. Okay, so the next slide. So the strategy lines of the plan is, so we wanted to have like something we needed to have something that is rights-based approach, and not only on the discourse, not only in the conceptual framework, but how do we really implement actions that are taking into account this rights-based approach. We needed to have a plan that had the voice of the children and adolescents. I mean, this tendency of doing policies without the active voice of the children and adolescents, which are impacting children and adolescents, is just unrealistic. And the other thing that we needed to do is like building evidence, and the evidence on trying to follow up the results of each of the tasks that we had developed on the strategy lines of the action plans. And this is, I mean, this is quite a challenge I'm going to mention a little bit later on the indicators. And then the other part is this is an intergovernmental and intersectoral strategy. So basically putting all together all sectors, not only the socioeconomic sector and the government, but putting all the entities working on behalf of children and against violence. In this one. So the strategic areas, we took seriously the inspired framework, and we basically organized the strategies of the plan into these 7 strategies. And we ended up with this alignment. So you see on the slide like 4 actions in the first strategy of the implementation and performance of the laws, then 6 actions of norms and values. I mean, we didn't actually, it was the way that we had the information or receive and also organize, and they also based on the discussions that we have with the entities. For example, you see there in income and economic strengthening, we only have 1 action, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the only action. We're working on together with other public entities to build upon other actions, because this income and economic strengthening is basically fundamental to the other strategies of the conceptual framework of Inspire, and it's really important for the families and children. So then we have not only these 31 strategies, and I had to say also this is kind of a flexible plan and it's not all bright in stone. We are working, we're still working with the entities, we're still working on getting to ground all these actions that they need to complete by the end of this year. These 3 scoring strategies, we thought that we have to have it along all the plan, and this means that we need to build an information system that is strong enough to provide us evidence for to evaluate the policies, introduce all continuously participatory mechanisms of children and adolescents, and as I mentioned before, mobilizing other key actors. Okay, this is me. Till now, I mean, we're going to go to the second part, which is consultations with children and adolescents, and I give the floor to Dora.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the participation of children and adolescents. First of all, I should say that as Anna very well explained, it was a very thorough and complex process, bearing in mind also that this is a large country with 32 states. And of course, ensuring the participation and the representation of different actors in different levels was a challenge. Therefore, even ensuring the participation of children and adolescents was per se a challenge. And I should say also as an introductory note that in Mexico we're still struggling a little bit with systemic processes of child participation. The NGOs are the ones that have acquired most experience, and the creation of the child protection system and the mechanisms envisioned in the law on the rights of children and adolescents are creating an opportunity for participation, but the tendency is still to use participation in a slightly tokenistic way. So we had to make sure that we weren't going to engage in tokenistic or representative kind of participation, and more genuine in little time and with lots to do. Therefore, we used a combination of methodologies, and we used the inputs of other participatory exercise that had been taking place in the process of development of other efforts within the child protection system. So, for instance, the executive secretariat of the system had engaged in a development of the action plan for children, which is like a national policy, right, for children. And they had engaged in a wide consultation with a series of workshops of children and adolescents on different issues. So we drew from some of the results related mainly to violence. The second effort that had taken place recently and that was worth rescuing was a wide consultation, anonymous consultation, undertaken by the National Electoral Institute in 2015. This is a very large participation mechanism that they have, which included 4 million children. It's anonymous, so they have a sort of polls, and they can post their suggestions on the surveys and the questionnaires that are distributed in schools and in other places. Then there were a couple of efforts led by NGOs. One was led by Save the Children Mexico, and it was mainly participation workshops, which contributed to a study on violence. And another effort was led by the Maristas Foundation with the Autonomous University of Mexico in Xochimilco, a network of NGOs, Redeem, SOS Children's Villages, and other NGOs, and they held a series of workshops with migrant children and adolescents, which for Mexico is an important reality that is also included in a plan of action. And it also included children in temporary residential care and in schools. And as a specific input to the plan, we also facilitated as UNICEF 3 consultations online. We have a mechanism, if some of you are familiar, called U-Report. It's an online mechanism using either, well, telephone, SMS, or Facebook, or Twitter, in the case of Mexico. And we have in UNICEF Mexico at the moment 60,000 U-reporters. So there were, between 2014 and 2016, we had 3 consultations on violence. And 2016 and 17, we had 3 consultations on violence, and we rescued the old ones. And we had a 3rd one specifically with inputs, requesting inputs for the plan. In the last one, of course, only 2,700 participated, although we sent a questionnaire to the 60,000. In addition, UNICEF Mexico had facilitated a series of workshops with adolescent girls, especially indigenous girls, in the last 2 years. And the results of these consultations were also brought forward. Regarding these consultations, they were held, as I said, with indigenous girls and adolescents, Afro-descendants. 2% of the population of, in Mexico is of Afro origin, and also migrant children in the states of Yucatan, Mexico, Mexico City, Morelos, Tabasco, Nuevo León, Guerrero, Coahuila, and Sonora. And different issues came out, and they were recommendations that are then taken forward with the governor of the states to develop sort of solutions and action plans. And as you can see, many of the concerns that the girls expressed were around violence, in particular sexual violence, child marriage, gender-based violence, discrimination, and corporal punishment. Next, please. As far as the U-Report activities were concerned, we had, as you can see, the breakdown of the participants according to the different subjects that were included in terms of violence against children, ideas on violence prevention, what can you do basically, and how violence is experienced. As I said, we didn't have the response from the 60,000, only a small percentage, but it was still significant. And you can see that the figures are quite high, as 73% of participants reported having suffered physical or verbal abuse at home. This is pretty much in line with the data that was published last year in the mixed survey, the survey done by the Institute of Public Health and UNICEF, where corporal punishment proved to be at 63%. Basically 63% of children aged 1 to 14 were exposed, had suffered physical or verbal abuse. And also 29% stated that parents and caregivers are the most common perpetrators, followed by police and their peers. And 63% recognize that violence is not okay and that it's harming them. In terms of solutions that they propose, it's interesting to note that children believe that family living and communication and harmonious relationships are key. 49% of them suggested that you need to work on the communication skills and relationships at home to ensure that this is a safe environment. Yes, that's it. So I give the floor back to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. So the final part of this presentation is about the mobilization involvement of other sectors of society, and this is the stage where we are at right now. And we basically launched the action plan on August the 2nd, and we had invited several sectors, and we're building up the commitments through which they will get involved in this alliance. One of them, which is the Academy, through the National Association of Universities and Higher Education Institutions, which they have committed to basically use their scholars base to purposefully seek for studies that might add to this, to know and to build evidence around violence against children. The second one is the Business Coordinating Council, which is gathers all the relevant businesses in Mexico, and we are building this alliance with each one of them to basically promote the alliance through their workers, as well as because I mean we need to understand that the ending violence is also a transforming culture in many senses, as we have talked about corporal punishment, which is very ingrained into our cultures. And then the third actor is the National Governments Conference, which gathers all the 32 governments. And this is quite relevant because we are really promoting that each state has their own action plan and do exactly similar, in a similar way, replicate this at the local level. And we have more impact at the local level that we do basically at the national, because children are basically the municipality. We know it has to be a higher priority of the planning of this enlargement of the alliance. And then the Mexican Network of Child-Friendly Cities, which is an initiative which integrated but a little bit more of 13 cities around Mexico, which are trying to do actions on behalf of children. And of course, religious associations, which have to be really adopted to the alliance that we want to build with different actors. Finally, the challenges, and which are, I must not, I mean, there are challenges that we can overcome if we really intend to do this sum of factors which are concerned and worry about doing change, making change to end violence against children. And so we have identified these 4 challenges, which you can see on the slide, but there are many others we need to take it into account. So one is the coordination. There's always a difficulty issue between coordinating between different levels, in the national, the state, and the municipal level, but also intergovernmental within the same federal government. The second one is quite relevant, mainly considering the electoral shifts that we're going to be suffering next year. So this plan intends to report at the end of this year, but then we have to build up for medium and long-term actions, and this is going to be going through an electoral process next year, and the participation of civil society organizations has to be at the core center of demanding the action realization of this plan and the continuous action of the government to end violence against children. And the other challenges is like how do we build process that we incorporate at all times the voice of children and adolescents. And the final one is the real appropriation of the plan by all the sectors involved, which I have already explained. And here I'm going to stop. I'm sure that there were plenty of questions, and I'm going to hand the microphone to Leo.
Yes, now we want to present the civil society's organization that is in this meeting, and they are members of Juconi, World Vision, SOS Children Village, guardians or guardianes, Philabatrist Foundation, Scouts, and World Vision, I already said, and then CONFE, that is a disability organization that is interesting on rights of children. They are going to present some how they participate in the elaboration of the National Action Plan, and also in the perspective of the SCO, which challenges or faces about the implementation of this plan. If you agree, I don't know, we propose that Isabel from Fulconi can speak from and give a perspective about it.
Good morning. We are very pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to be here representing the OSCs. Did you? Can you get? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, super. Okay, no, just basically, we have all been involved in the process at different degrees. I think that in the beginning, just to quote one organization like SAFE, was where they were very suspicious of the process. I think we have been participating the way each organization has been able to do it. It's not, we're still not totally organized the way we would like to be. But also, rather than talk about how we are going to making sure and supporting this very important effort at national level, what we would like to ask also is to know from the government, and this is part of the discussions we're having, how we're going to implement this strategy, not just at federal level, but at state and municipal level, because really the children are at municipal level, and when are we going to start seeing results on this for at national level, but also at municipal level. Also, some concerns, and I'm going to say some of the concerns that we have, because I think that will start the discussion. It was the fact that there are many issues that are also not captured in the document, and I will mention some that colleagues have sent to me. They said the most delicate is that the alliance is ignoring the high taxes of impunity. 96% of the denounced cases that there is in Mexico are not being taken into consideration, and so we have to make sure that the negation and the impunity are also taken into consideration, especially also in judicial processes, because unless we do that, we don't actually see, big results. Also, there is points on corporal punishment that also can take away from other themes like sexual homicides and disappearances. So there are certain areas that have not totally been covered as far as some of the NGOs are concerned, but we are looking forward to working together and ensuring that these areas are also taken into consideration, because we wanted to make a real global alliance, a real program in Mexico for children where the results are going to be seen rapidly. We're also a little bit concerned that we only have a plan for 2 years. We understand why we have only a plan for 2 years, but we would like to start working now on a wider program so that when we have a change in government, there won't be a change in the policy and there won't be a change in the actions that have been approved in the connection also with the SDGs. I think everything has to be seen in the same context, and we want to make sure that this is a real alliance. And from our side, I think we're all very willing and very serious in following up on this partnership. I don't know if somebody else wants to add.
Yeah, just one more question. ¿Alguien más quisiera decir algo?
Sí. Yeah.
There's one more participation.
Hi, everybody. It's Maria Orbañan from World Vision Mexico. And we were just wondering if we could talk in this call or later about the Inspire strategy on countries, on the different at country level and regional level, because I think, well, we have now the plan, and still we still need to feel more appropriation of the Inspire strategy. So that will just be intervention. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think Sabine Rakutumalala, who is on the line, has a response to that. Let me just bring her in.
Yeah, Beth, we are done here, so we leave the floor to the participants for questions.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really, really informative. I think that really spoke to so many of the issues that this group is interested in. And you have just accomplished so much in the past 8 months. So congratulations. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions. Like I said, we have Sabine Rakutumalala here, as well as Alex Bouchard from WHO, and lots of other participants as well. Let me unmute Sabine. There we go. Sorry about that. Sabine, we can hear you now. Hi, Sabine. Does anyone else have any questions in the meantime? Oh.
Beth, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just wanted to respond to the World Vision comments. First of all, I really want to thank for the government of Mexico, the society, the UN.
Sabine, you're kind of breaking out a bit. Could you maybe come closer to the mic, or you're kind of faint?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you all, the presenters, for this wonderful collaboration over the last year and for coming to such wonderful results. And for us as a country, that's a pathfinding country, it's really great to see such a strong national action plan, something that we can really share with other countries. So you really are pathfinding. You are an example of other countries that's doing it perfectly well and that you can share with others. In terms of implementing Inspire, I think we've seen different models. We've seen some countries that have chosen one or two strategies.
Sabine, sorry, the quality of your sound is pretty weak. It was, yeah. There's some, when you're, I think when you're up close, we can hear you better, but then it fades away. So if you could really try to stay close to the mic, that would be great.
I just wanted to say that different countries have used different ways of implementing Inspire. For example, Nigeria has selected 2 strategies. They're focusing on the social norms and on the parenting, and they're trying to implement that throughout the country. But the most important, in my view, is that we make sure we have the evidence that will inform our programming, so that sorry, I'm hearing myself double, so it's very strange. That we really use the existing Inspire strategies, the interventions that are there and that have been tested and controlled and start implementing those rather than be innovative and develop new interventions. So we're seeing, for example, now Sri Lanka is learning from the Parenting for Lifelong Health program, which is being implemented in South Africa, and they're going to replicate that program. So I think we shouldn't be daunted, but really base ourselves on interventions that are already working. Over.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and also to base those interventions and the selection of interventions on the data from the country where you're implementing. So I guess that would be my question. Would be if you could talk about how the data that you had informed your selection of programs.
Beth, can I ask a question in relation to data?
Yes.
Alex? Right, I put my question into the chat box, and the question is, does the plan of action address the high-risk groups and risk factors identified in Mexico's 2014 Social Survey on Social Cohesion for the Prevention of Violence and Delinquency, in Spanish ECOPRED, which looked at all sorts of violence among 12 to 17-year-old youth, and paints quite a different picture to that which was described in the presentation. I forwarded you the paper describing those findings, and you could, if you would be willing, share it with the Mexican colleagues.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I will. This is Dora. I will answer on the data question. Yes, we have taken all the data, the most significant surveys that we have. In fact, we had already done a sort of mapping of what is available. So even the EcoPred was used. And let's say that we have mapped a bit the issues that are indicated or shown by the surveys, and that's how we have built on the plan. So the context is very much fed into by data, and so are the actions. And I must say that related to the actions, what you just mentioned earlier, we have only 18 months to go in this administration. So exactly, we took the existing plan, basically nothing is new, and we tried to see what can make a difference. I mean, how can we mainstream violence? How can things be changed to make it more effective? So that's how we worked. And I would like to say on data also that, as Anna mentioned, there is a cross-cutting element on data. Mexico has quite a lot of data on violence, but there are a lot of gaps. I mean, you cannot say what is the total prevalence of physical, sexual, and emotional violence from 0 to 18. In fact, if you recall, some of you are familiar with the publication Hidden in Plain Sight, Mexico was comparable only in terms of the number of homicide. Likely now we already have the corporal punishment bit, but we are working on this issue, and the National Statistics Institute has been very collaborative. They're also part of the effort, and they are already taking, well, a few initiatives. One of them is that they have a technical committee on children, and they're looking at different issues, including the information system, the child protection system, which will include data on violence. And also they are doing a desk review of what is available and what are the gaps. And in general, there is an interest of INEGI and also other public institutes that do household surveys into integrating and mainstreaming violence questions into existing survey, because there is a very high capacity in Mexico of survey management and household surveys. So the best strategy has been decided is to mainstream.
Thanks, Alex. Did you have any follow-up to that, or?
No, that's good. Thanks very much for the response.
Great. I see that Anna has a question, Anna from UNODC. So let me. Hi, Anna. You should be able to speak now.
Yes, hi, good morning, good afternoon from Vienna. This is Anna Judice from the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. And I also wanted to mention that some of our colleagues in Mexico are connected to the call. And I just wanted to ask what has been the involvement of the police and the justice sector, whether it's and the Ministry of Justice at the federal or at the state level in this process. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon in Vienna to Vienna. I'm Liliana Estañol from the National Security Commission, Mexico. This is actually the minister which attends the problems, the crime problems and violence problems. So in this item, we are the institution that coordinated the Commission Against Violence Children. So we have involved in this project since the beginning. Always working together with UNICEF and the Secretary of Protection to Children here in Mexico. So we are in the 7th age of Inspire. One of these, which correspond to the environmental security. We are in this item very compromised, and we are organized many actions for the next 18 months, and we're trying to. In fact, we are working with UNODC. Because in the National Commission Security, we have a very strange collaboration with you, and especially in the women items. And we are elaborated a capacitation project to police in not only federal police, but also the police of different states here in Mexico. And especially we try to create a special group in each police corporation, which have the ability skills to attend to the different vulnerable groups, not only children, but also women, and even the personnel with some disability. Okay, and these limitations. So this is one of the best, more important actions that since the institutions of security here in Mexico are committed with the action plan. Thank you.
Thanks. We also have a question from Alessandra Guedes from Pajo. She wanted to know if you could speak about the ethical and methodological issues surrounding mainstreaming violence questions into surveys, and particularly the issues surrounding the violence against children surveys. Alessandra, did you want to add to that? You're unmuted if you wanted to.
Everyone. No, I think that's the question. I found it interesting that Anna mentioned that you have found that the best strategy is to mainstream violence questions into existing surveys, and it would just be helpful to understand how that's done given the ethical and methodological issues surrounding violence against children research. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. This is Dora again. Well, you're raising a very important point. In fact, we haven't yet moved forward. This is the decision that has been taken, and in reality, I mean, this is a position that UNICEF shares in general, I mean, regionally and globally, and I think you're familiar with that. But we understand that there are ethical and methodological concerns. In fact, we won't be able to get into depth as the CDC and Together for Girls surveys, the National Service on Children. Of course, those are much more comprehensive, but it's also true that they're very costly and they're not very sustainable. And since the government has a very high capacity in terms of data development and production, and there are a lot of surveys that have been done, what we have agreed, I mean, as a country to do is to review the different questions and methodologies and indicators and strike a balance between ethics and what is feasible and what we can achieve. For example, as you know, the mixed methodology on corporal punishment, there is a module and it's asked to caregivers, and maybe it's not as complete, but it gives us a good picture, and that's what has been used as a reference. So, I mean, there are methods, or like asking about sexual violence to adult women, and in retrospective, they can talk better, right, about the past. So, I mean, we are aware of the developments in terms of methodologies globally, and we definitely are seeking also for expertise. In fact, yesterday we were in touch also with the Partnership Secretariat to get all these developments and tools to start discussing internally.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I am not seeing any further questions from participants. Oh, here's one from Katherine Leslie. Hold on, let me find it. Okay, so Katherine from the SRSG's office was wondering for the actions identified under each of the strategies, if they've been costed, and if so, are they budgeted for by the government? Important question. Over to Mexico.
Hi, this is Ana. So this is a really good question, and we're basically seeking to, so the budget for this year is already established at the beginning of this year. So basically we're dealing with an issue of doing with the budget that we already have in place in each of the public entities responsible for each of the actions. What we aim to do for next year is we're working on through the guidelines for budgeting the actual costs of the actions for next year. So this is quite of a process that we're trying to work it through the other two committees that we have of the National Comprehensive Systems, working with the Hacienda y Crédito Público. The budget, the IRS of Mexico, which they, I'm placing that as a priority. This is an issue because most of the policies on behalf of children, they are not publicized enough to make it to be on the public agenda. So we are aiming to do that with the IRS and trying to work on the guidelines in two actions, basically budgeting next year actions, and the other has to do with transparency on the budgeting for next year and placing that on the guidelines of the IRC. So that's kind of a challenge that I didn't mention at the end of the presentation, but we do have that challenge. We are asking that civil society organizations which have been alliance on this to remind the entities which are in charge specifically on the budgeting for next year to help us with that, because the budget is approved by the chamber, the deputy chamber. So we are doing everything that we can and we have on hands, and really lobbying with the chamber.
Thank you for that that answer. I am not seeing any further questions now. We are right close to the end of the time, so if anyone else has further questions, now is your chance. Otherwise, we have made a recording of this, and we will send out notes in the next couple days. You can also share that, of course, with your colleagues who are unable to join. And I wanted to thank again everyone from the Mexico team for this really insightful presentation, and again, most importantly, for all of the work that you are doing on the ground. I think this absolutely can serve as a model for other countries, particularly in terms of the processes that you use to engage so many different sectors of society and really make sure that this was that you were getting strong engagement from everyone, from children to CSOs. So I really commend you for that, and I'm very excited to see the next steps of the action plan unfolding.
Okay, we have here some questions and comments about the implementation of the plan.
So one of the main concerns here expressed by one of the organizations, but also I think it's also shared by the comprehensive system, is so how do we strengthen the special protection system? So it's around the comprehensive system. So basically is when to assist children who have been victims of violence. So this is kind of also one of the challenges. I mean, I hate to say it, but we have a lot of challenges ahead. But I mean, I think the main point here is to be able to raise those challenges and to be aware of those challenges, to act upon those challenges. So I didn't want to pass that along. And so the special protection system is one of the main components of these comprehensive systems and needs to be strengthened as well. It's part of the action plan, but.
Hi, this is Dora. I just wanted to make one final comment also that, of course, you know, it was a bit of a challenging moment for Mexico because we are at the closure of the administration. So also in terms of budget, this implies cuts and not additional budgets for children. That is why the strategy was to build on existing programs and see what was feasible. And many of the institutions had to also kind of lower their expectations. As Anna explained, at the moment we couldn't include the budget. However, she said what's going to be done at the government level and the NGOs, and we are all going to advocate, but also we are contemplating the possibility of doing a sort of investment case or costing for the future. And in reality, what I would like to say is that this is kind of, you know, it gives a sense of direction and commitment until the end of this administration, but it's been a very clear message at the launch and in all our discussions that this is the starting point, really, in reality. What is key is to develop also an agenda which will transcend and go beyond, you know, administrations, and NGOs will play a key role in this and make sure that we have a sort of strategic roadmap aiming at 2030, so that this issue doesn't fall behind or doesn't, you know, fall through the cracks at the end of this administration. And perhaps doing an investment case in addition to the strategy could be useful. So these are ideas that we want to keep going as a commission to end violence against children.
We have 2 comments more.
Isabel Crowley from Fundación Juconi, representation of the OSCs. También, also it will be important that we have and benefit from the experience, the international experience, so that we we would suggest that perhaps a monthly newsletter of what's happening all over the world, new ideas, so that we can also benefit from what the others are doing. And we totally endorse what Dora just said, so we're not going to repeat ourselves. Also concerned about child participation, how to make it real in this country, and to, as we know, with all the challenges that we already have, I think we're very committed to that. The use of the EU report is one, but we really need to find other ways that represent the totality of the 40 million children in this country.
Thank you. And yes, I think the idea of sharing experiences between countries is very important. And our hope is that, you know, this CSO forum, that this implementation working group can be one forum for doing that. And we're happy to add you to our listserv. This is the second country action call that we've hosted. The first one was from Uganda, and there will definitely be others in the future. So it would be great if the Mexico team could participate in those calls. And I think that as time goes on, there will be some other more creative ways to share across countries as well. And hopefully Inspire can be part of that sharing.
Okay, this is Eva Solorzano from WHO, Mexico, and just a quick comment. We are working together very close with UNICEF, both offices from Mexico, in order to support all the system and also the Global Alliance. So we are here to hear everything you said and to make this an effort to go where we want to go. That's all.
Terrific. There are a few people that have asked if you would be willing to share the slides that you presented. Is that something that you could share with me and then I can distribute to the people that were on the call?
Yes, we can do that. I just have a request here. I know you launched a set of tools here, and that will be interesting just to test it here. So the one is economic costing model. The other one, we would really like to know what are the progress on doing these indicators through the alliance, the Global Alliance. I know a working group is working on indicators, and this could be really useful to the Mexican experience, especially because we need to be looking at the construction of indicators for the next couple of months. And I know you're working on a handbook of really sharing this inspired framework, also with a real concrete example. So that's also going to be useful as well when you have that tool.
Great. Yeah, those are exactly all things that are in the works, and we can make sure, I think, through the global partnership and through Inspire that you are aware as soon as those resources become available. Any final comments?
From this side, there's no more comments.
Great. Thank you again. This was, I think, exactly what we were looking for. So this was really fantastic. And thanks to all of the participants who joined in as well. I know August can be a rough time for making calls, so I appreciate everyone that made time, and stay tuned for notes, and we'll be in touch about the next implementation working group meeting soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.